The war had been going on for 73 years. Every species in the galaxy knew about it. The Krell Empire was winning, and everyone else was dying. Ambassador Valora walked through the halls of the United Nations building in Geneva. Her blue skin reflected the lights above her head. She was tired. Her people had been fighting for 3 generations, and they were losing. The Krell were like insects, but bigger and meaner. They ate entire planets and turned living beings into slaves. She entered the meeting room where the human leaders waited. President Helen Martinez sat at the head of the table. General Paul Hendricks was next to her. There were others too, men and women in military uniforms and business suits. They all looked at Valora with calm faces. "Thank you for meeting with me," Valora said. She sat down in the chair they offered her. Helen nodded. "You said it was urgent?" "We're listening." Valora pulled out a small device and placed it on the table. A hologram appeared showing star maps and battle reports. Red markers showed Krell territory. Blue markers showed Coalition space. The red was everywhere, pushing into the blue like blood spreading through water. "This is the Orion Threshold," Valora said, pointing to a cluster of stars. "It's the last major defense point between Krell space and the core worlds. If it falls, they will reach your system within 2 years." The humans studied the map. They didn't look scared. They looked interested. "How many ships do they have at the threshold?" Paul asked. "Around 4,000 capital ships. Maybe twice that in support vessels." Valora's voice was flat. Those numbers had stopped meaning anything to her years ago. Paul wrote something down on a tablet. "And your forces?" "We have 8,000 ships total, but they're spread across 20 sectors. We can only spare 3,000 for the threshold defense." "You're outnumbered," Helen said. "Yes, we've been outnumbered for a decade. We're asking for help, any help. Supplies, medical aid, resources. We don't expect Earth to send military forces. You've only known about the wider galaxy for 15 years. Your technology is still developing." Something passed between Helen and Paul. A look, a small smile. "Let's talk about what we can offer," Helen said. "But first we need complete access to your intelligence reports. Everything about the Krell. Their tactics, their biology, their technology, their supply lines. All of it." Valora felt hope bloom in her chest. "Of course. I'll transfer everything immediately. Though I must warn you, there are thousands of reports. It will take your analysts months to process all of it." Paul leaned back in his chair. "How soon do you need an answer?" "The Krell will attack the threshold in 90 days. If we're going to reinforce our position, we need to move ships now." "Give us 3 days," Helen said. "We'll have an answer for you." Valora wanted to argue. 3 days seemed too fast to make such important decisions, but she was desperate, and desperate people don't argue with anyone willing to help. 3 days, she agreed. After Valora left, the room stayed quiet for a moment. Then Paul turned to the others. "Get me Admiral Lisa Kane, get me Colonel Jake Morrison, get me every fleet commander we have. Tell them it's time." A woman in a Navy uniform spoke up. She was Commander Karen Price, head of Naval Intelligence. "Sir, are we really doing this?" "We've been preparing for this since first contact," Paul said. "We knew this day would come. The question was never if we'd join the war. It was when." Helen stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city of Geneva looked peaceful. People walked on the streets. Cars moved through traffic. Nobody out there knew that the entire human race was about to go to war. "The Krell won't expect us to be a threat," she said. "They think we're primitive." "That's why we'll win," Paul replied. For 15 years, humanity had been watching and learning. While they smiled and traded with the coalition species, their scientists had been working day and night. Every piece of alien technology that came to Earth was studied, reverse-engineered, and improved. Every battle report from the war was analyzed by military computers. The humans had built new weapons. They had designed new ships. They had created artificial intelligence systems that could think faster than any living being. They had done all of this in secret, behind closed doors, in hidden laboratories deep underground and in space stations far from prying eyes. The coalition thought humans were friendly, but weak. They thought Earth was a nice little planet with nice little people who would maybe send some supplies and wish them luck. They had no idea what was really coming. 3 days later, Valora returned to the United Nations building. She was escorted to a different room this time, a larger one. It was full of people, all of them looking at screens and talking in low voices. Helen was there, and Paul, and many others that Valora didn't recognize. Admiral Lisa Kane was among them. a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. Ambassador, Helen said, we've reviewed your intelligence reports. All of them? Valora asked in surprise. But there were thousands of files. We have good computers, Paul said with a slight smile. We're prepared to commit military forces to the defense of the Orion threshold. Valora felt relief wash over her. Thank you. Even a small force will help. Every ship matters. We'll be sending 300 vessels, Lisa said. The room went quiet. Valora stared at the Admiral. 300? But that's your entire space fleet. Not quite, Lisa replied. That's about 40% of our available forces. The rest stay here to defend Earth and our other colonies. I don't understand, Valora said. 15 years ago, you had barely reached your own moon. How do you have 700 warships? Helen and Paul exchanged another look. Then Helen spoke. When we learned about the galactic community, we also learned about the war. We made a decision then. We decided that if we ever faced an enemy like the Krell, we needed to be ready. So we built ships, a lot of ships. We've been building them for 15 years in shipyards hidden in our asteroid belt and beyond. But the resources, Valora protested. The cost. We're very good at building things quickly when we're motivated, Paul said. And the possibility of giant space insects eating our planet was very motivating. Lisa pulled up a hologram. It showed sleek ships different from anything Valora had seen before. They looked dangerous, like bullets designed to fly through space. Our fleet will arrive at the Orion threshold in 72 hours, Lisa said. We'll coordinate with your forces there. Tell your commander to expect us. Valora looked at the ships in the hologram. Something about them made her nervous. They didn't look like coalition vessels, which were built for long campaigns and defensive operations. These human ships looked like they were built for one thing only: killing. What are your battle plans? She asked. We're going to end this war, Helen said simply. The Krell have had 73 years to terrorize the galaxy. We're going to make sure they don't get a 74th. As Valora left Earth carrying the news back to the Coalition, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not just hope. Something else. Something that felt almost like fear, but not fear of the Krell. She had just made an alliance with a species that built 700 warships in secret and called it being prepared. A species that looked at 73 years of losing war and said they would end it. A species that smiled with friendly faces but had eyes that promised violence to anyone who threatened them. The Krell Empire had ruled through fear for generations. They were about to learn what real fear felt like, and they had 72 hours to figure it out. The Orion threshold was a point in space where 3 major jump routes connected. Control it, and you controlled access to dozens of star systems. Lose it, and the enemy could pour through like water through a broken dam. Commander Thrace of the Coalition fleet floated in his command chair, his 6 arms working different controls at once. His species didn't need gravity, which saved power on the ship. He watched the sensor displays with growing worry. The Krell fleet was gathering on the far side of the jump gate. 4,000 ships, all of them ready to attack. His own fleet had 3,000 ships pulled from every available sector. It wasn't enough. It had never been enough against the Krell. They would fight, they would hold as long as possible, and then they would die. That was how the war had always gone. Sir, his sensor officer called out. Multiple ships emerging from faster-than-light travel. Bearing 047, Thrace tensed. Were the Krell attacking early? He pulled up the sensors himself. Then he stopped. The ships weren't Krell. The identification signal said they were human. How many? He asked. The sensor officer checked again. 300 contacts. All capital ships. They're arranging in formation. 300. Thrace felt something he hadn't felt in years. Surprise. He had expected maybe 30 ships, a token force to show support. Instead, the humans had sent a full battle fleet. Open a channel to their flagship, Thrace ordered. A moment later, a human face appeared on his screen. She was an older woman with gray hair and hard eyes. Admiral Lisa Kane, according to the identification tag. Commander Thrace, Lisa said. We're here to assist with the defense. Admiral Kane, welcome. Your arrival is most fortunate. I'm uploading our tactical network protocols now. Once your systems are integrated, we can coordinate our defense. Lisa shook her head. That won't be necessary, Commander. We'll handle the northern quadrant. I recommend you pull your forces back to defensive positions around the jump gate. Thrace felt his arms twitch in confusion. Admiral, with respect, we cannot abandon our forward positions. If we pull back, the Krell will have room to maneuver. They won't need room to maneuver, Lisa said calmly. They'll be dead. Pull your ships back, Commander. You're about to see something new. Before Thrace could argue, the human fleet began to move. They didn't charge forward like brave fools. They didn't even form a battle line. Instead, they spread out in a strange pattern that made no tactical sense. Then each ship released something. Small objects, thousands of them, spreading out in every direction. On the sensors, they looked like debris or maybe mines. But they moved with purpose, arranging themselves in a three-dimensional grid that covered enormous amounts of space. What are those? Thrace's tactical officer asked. I don't know, Thrace admitted. The Krell fleet detected the human presence. Thrace could see their formations shifting, preparing to attack. 4,000 bioships began moving forward, their organic hulls pulsing with energy. They had fought the coalition for decades and won. A few hundred human ships wouldn't change that. The Krell commander probably thought the same thing. The small objects the humans had released suddenly came alive. All of them, all at once. Thrace's sensors went crazy as thousands of energy signatures flared to life. The objects began moving incredibly fast, each one targeting a different Krell ship. Then they exploded. But these weren't normal explosions. The energy release was massive, far bigger than anything their size should produce. And the explosions didn't just destroy ships. They created some kind of chain reaction, each blast triggering the next, forming a web of pure destruction that covered the entire northern quadrant. When the light faded, the Krell northern fleet was gone. Not damaged, not disabled, simply gone. 3,000 ships had existed a moment ago. Now there was only wreckage and expanding clouds of gas. Thrace's command center was completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They all just stared at the sensors, trying to understand what they had just seen. What did they do? Someone whispered. Lisa's face appeared on the screen again. Commander Thrace, we're pursuing the remaining Krell forces. Keep your ships at the jump gate. We'll handle this. The human fleet moved forward. The Krell ships in the other quadrants were already turning to run. They had just watched a third of their fleet get destroyed in 90 seconds. Even the Krell understood when they were outmatched, but the humans didn't let them run. Their ships were faster, moving through space at speeds that shouldn't be possible. They caught up with the fleeing Krell vessels and opened fire with weapons that cut through bioarmor like it was paper. Jake Morrison stood in the drop bay of the assault carrier Washington, checking his armor seals one more time. Around him, 50 other Marines did the same. They had trained for this moment for years. Now it was real. Listen up, Jake called out. His voice carried through the bay. Our job is simple. We board any Krell command ship that survives the fleet action. We get their computers. We get their data. We get out. The fleet will cover us, sir, one of the younger Marines asked. What if they fight back? Jake smiled inside his helmet. Then we fight harder. The Washington shook as it fired missiles at a massive Krell bioship. The ship was trying to escape into deeper space, its organic engines pulsing with desperate energy. The missiles struck home, not destroying the ship but frying its propulsion systems with electromagnetic pulses. Target disabled, the pilot announced. Boarding teams, you are go. Jake led his team through the airlock and across open space. They hit the Krell hull and began cutting through with plasma torches. The organic armor resisted, but human tools were designed for this. They had studied Krell biology for 15 years. They knew exactly where to cut. Inside, the ship was dark and wet. The corridors twisted like intestines because they were intestines. The entire ship was a living creature, bred and grown for war. It smelled terrible. Spread out, Jake ordered. Find the data core. They moved through the ship in pairs, weapons ready. The Krell crew fought back. Warriors 3 meters tall with natural armor and plasma weapons appeared from side passages. But the Marines had trained for this too. They used grenades designed to work in enclosed spaces. They used tactics based on room clearing and urban warfare. They used weapons that hit hard enough to crack Krell armor, Sergeant Amy Cole called out over the radio. Found it, sir. The data core is 2 levels down. Jake and his team fought their way to her position. The data core was a pulsing mass of organic material, part computer and part brain. It was disgusting to look at, but it contained everything the Krell knew. Every star system, every supply route, every military installation. Amy pulled out a device that looked like a large needle. She jammed it into the data core, and the device began downloading information. The core fought back, trying to shut down or purge its memory, but human hackers had designed this tool specifically to counter organic computer defenses. "Got it," Amy said after 2 minutes. "Full download complete. Everyone out," Jake ordered. Back to the Washington. "Move, move, move." They fought their way back through the ship, leaving dead Krell behind them. The Washington was waiting, its bay doors open. The Marines piled in and the ship pulled away from the dying bioship. "Mission successful," Jake reported. "We have their database." While the main fleet fought at the Orion threshold, other human ships were moving through space on different missions. Captain Derek Shaw commanded the stealth destroyer Philadelphia. His ship was small, fast, and almost impossible to detect. It used experimental technology that bent light and radiation around the hull. Derek and his crew had slipped past the Krell lines completely. They were now approaching Krell Prime, the homeworld of the insect empire. The planet was heavily defended, but the Philadelphia wasn't here to fight. Approaching weapons range, his tactical officer reported. "Load the impactor," Derek ordered. In the Philadelphia's main launch tube, a missile prepared for firing. But this wasn't a normal missile. It was a solid rod of tungsten, 3 meters long and 1 meter wide. There was no explosive. There didn't need to be. The impactor would be accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. When it hit something, the kinetic energy alone would be devastating. "Target locked on the moon," the tactical officer said. Derek took a breath. What he was about to do would kill millions. The moon was inhabited, home to military bases and industrial facilities. But this was war, and war was about making the enemy quit. "Fire," he said. The impactor launched, accelerating away from the Philadelphia at impossible speeds. It crossed the distance to the moon in seconds. When it struck, the explosion was visible across multiple star systems. The moon didn't just crack, it shattered. Massive fragments broke away and began falling toward Krell Prime. The planet had 4 hours before the bombardment began. Derek watched on the sensors as panic spread through the Krell home system. Ships scattered in every direction. Military bases began emergency evacuations. The entire heart of their empire was in chaos. "Message sent," Derek said quietly. "Take us out of here." Back at the Orion threshold, the battle was ending. The Krell fleet was destroyed or scattered. Human ships patrolled the area, hunting down stragglers. Commander Thrace and his coalition fleet had barely fired a shot. Lisa Kane stood on the bridge of the UNSS Victory, watching the tactical. The coalition had rules for warfare. Every civilized species did. You didn't target civilian populations. You didn't destroy entire planets. You didn't use certain types of weapons that caused unnecessary suffering. War was supposed to be controlled, limited, something you could negotiate your way out of. Humans had different ideas about war. General Paul Hendricks sat in the command center in Geneva, watching data streams from across 3 sectors of space. Around him, officers monitored hundreds of screens showing ship positions, battle reports, and enemy communications. The room hummed with quiet efficiency. "Sir, the Krell are trying to regroup at the Deneb system," an intelligence officer reported. "They're pulling ships from garrison duty across their territory." Paul studied the map. Deneb was a major industrial system, full of shipyards and supply depots. If the Krell were allowed to gather forces there, they might try to continue the fight. "Send the second fleet," Paul ordered. "Tell Admiral Kane to split her forces. She keeps half at the Orion threshold. The other half goes to Deneb. Orders are to destroy all military infrastructure." "All of it, sir." "All of it," Paul confirmed. "Every shipyard, every depot, every military installation. If it can build or supply a warship, it gets destroyed." The officer hesitated. "Sir, some of those facilities are in orbit of inhabited planets. Civilian casualties could be significant." Paul turned to look at him. "Give them 4 hours warning to evacuate. Anyone still there after that chose to stay. The Krell have been enslaving and eating civilians for 70 years. They don't get to hide behind civilians now." President Helen Martinez entered the command center. She had been on a call with the Coalition Council, trying to explain what humanity was doing. From the look on her face, it hadn't gone well. "They're calling us ruthless," Helen said. "They want us to slow down, to give the Krell time to negotiate a proper surrender. After 70 years of war, now they want to negotiate?" Paul shook his head. "The Krell understand one thing, force. We show them force, we end this war. We slow down and negotiate, this war continues for another decade. I know, Helen said. I told them the same thing. They didn't like it. She looked at the tactical displays. How long until the Krell completely collapse? At current pace, maybe another hour. Maybe less. Once we hit Deneb and take out their industrial capacity, they'll have nothing left to fight with. Helen nodded. She looked tired. Leading humanity into its first galactic war was exhausting, even when you were winning. Make sure our people know the rules of engagement. If Krell forces surrender, we accept it. We're not here to commit genocide. Understood, ma'am. Jake Morrison and his Marines were on their third boarding action. The data from the first Krell ship had been incredibly valuable, showing human forces exactly where to strike. Now they were hitting Krell command ships across the sector, grabbing intelligence and destroying their ability to coordinate. The bioship they were on now was dying. The Washington had hit it with penetrating rounds that tunneled deep into its organic structure, causing catastrophic damage. Jake and his team had maybe 15 minutes before the whole thing came apart. Move faster, Jake shouted over the sound of groaning metal and flesh. The ship was screaming, a high-pitched wail that came from everywhere at once. We get the data and we get out. They found the data core in a chamber that was already filling with fluid. The ship was bleeding to death. Amy Cole waded through the mess and attached the download device. Around them, Krell crew members were abandoning their posts, trying to reach escape pods. Sir, should we stop them? One of the Marines asked. Jake shook his head. Let them go. We're here for data, not prisoners. The download finished. Amy pulled the device free and they ran back through the collapsing corridors. Behind them, entire sections of the ship were failing, organic walls splitting open to expose internal organs the size of buildings. They made it to the airlock just as the deck beneath them buckled. The Washington picked them up and pulled away. Jake watched through the port as the Krell bioship finally died, its massive body going dark and beginning to drift. How many ships is that? Amy asked. 15 command vessels boarded and stripped of intelligence, Jake said. The analysts back home are going to be busy for years processing all this data. Think we got enough? We got more than enough. We know everything now. Where they live, what they eat, how they think. When this war ends, the Krell won't be able to hide anything from us. Captain Derek Shaw and the Philadelphia were on their second mission. After destroying the Krell moon, they had been reassigned to hit supply convoys. The Krell Empire ran on a complex network of supply ships moving food, fuel, and materials between systems. Cut those supply lines and the Empire would starve. Convoy spotted, his sensor officer reported. 20 cargo ships, 3 escorts. Plot an intercept course, Derek ordered. Weapons free when we're in range. The Philadelphia dropped out of stealth right on top of the convoy. The Krell escorts never had a chance to react. Human missiles struck them from 3 directions at once, overwhelming their defenses. The cargo ships tried to scatter, but they were slow and unarmed. Derek felt no pleasure in what came next. Destroying cargo ships was necessary, but not glorious. Still, each ship they destroyed was food that wouldn't reach Krell soldiers, fuel that wouldn't power Krell warships. All targets destroyed, his tactical officer reported. No survivors. Back to stealth, Derek said. Find the next convoy. They would do this 20 more times over the next 3 hours. Each time, the result was the same. Krell supply lines were collapsing across their territory. Commander Karen Price sat on the bridge of the science vessel Enterprise, analyzing everything the human fleet was doing. Her job was to document the war for future study. Every tactic, every weapon, every decision was recorded and analyzed. What she saw both impressed and disturbed her. Human weapons were devastatingly effective. The small munitions that had destroyed the Krell fleet at the Orion threshold each carried antimatter warheads. Antimatter was known to the Coalition, but it was considered too dangerous to weaponize. Humans had figured out how to make it stable and safe to transport. The kinetic impactors, like the one that destroyed the Krell moon, were even simpler. Just solid metal moving very fast, no complex technology, no exotic materials. Pure physics applied with brutal efficiency, but it was the tactics that really stood out. Humans fought with a speed and coordination that seemed impossible. Every ship in the fleet shared information in real time through quantum communication networks. Artificial intelligence systems processed the data and made tactical recommendations faster than any living being could think. The Coalition had banned military AI centuries ago. after an incident where an AI had made decisions that resulted in massive civilian casualties. They believed organic intelligence was needed to make moral choices in war. Humans disagreed. Their AIs were tools, carefully controlled and monitored, but they were tools that could process battlefield data and coordinate fleet movements better than any alternative. "Captain," her science officer said, "I'm detecting something strange in the human weapon signatures. The energy output is higher than their ships should be able to generate." Karen checked the data herself. Her officer was right. Human ships were somehow producing more power than their reactors should provide. "They must have improved the reactor design," she said. "Add it to the report." What Karen didn't know was that humans had made a breakthrough in zero-point energy extraction. They could pull power directly from the quantum foam of space itself. It was technology the Coalition hadn't even theorized yet. Humans had been very busy during those 15 years. The Krell leadership was gathering an emergency session on their capital world. Or what was left of their capital world. The moon's destruction had rained debris on the planet for hours. Entire cities were damaged. Millions were dead or injured. The psychological impact was even worse. The Krell had always believed they were invincible. They had conquered dozens of species. They had fought the Coalition to a standstill for decades. Nothing could touch their home world. Then humans showed up and shattered their moon in a single attack. The High Commander, a massive Krell the size of a ground vehicle, addressed the emergency council. "We must sue for peace. The humans are not like the Coalition. They do not fight to contain us. They fight to destroy us. We still have ships," one of the council members protested. "We still have soldiers. We can fight with what?" the High Commander demanded. "Our northern fleet is gone. Our supply lines are cut. Our industrial systems are under attack. And the humans are still holding back. Intelligence reports they've only committed half their fleet. Half." The chamber fell silent. Everyone there understood what that meant. If this was only half of human military power, what would the full force look like? "Send the surrender signal," the High Commander ordered. "To all our forces in all sectors, the war is over." Back in Geneva, Paul watched the messages come in. Krell forces across 3 sectors were broadcasting surrender. The war was ending. "Time check," he said. 5 hours, 9 minutes since first contact with enemy forces," an officer replied. Paul nodded. They had estimated the campaign would take between 4 and 6 hours depending on Krell response. Right in the middle of the projection. The surrender happened so fast that most species didn't believe it at first. News traveled through Coalition space at the speed of light, carried by quantum communication networks. Within hours, every inhabited planet knew the impossible truth. The Krell Empire, which had dominated galactic warfare for 73 years, had completely surrendered to humanity. The war was over. Total time, 5 hours and 12 minutes. Admiral Lisa Kane stood on the bridge of the UNSS Victory, reading through surrender documents. Around her, the crew worked quietly, still processing what they had accomplished. Through the viewports, she could see hundreds of Krell bioships floating dead in space, their organic hulls cold and dark. "Admiral, the Coalition Council is requesting a meeting," her communications officer said. "They want to discuss terms for the Krell surrender." Lisa almost smiled. "Tell them the terms are already decided. The Krell military is disbanded. Their shipyards are destroyed. Their slave worlds are freed. These aren't negotiations. They insist on being included, ma'am." "Fine, send them our full terms. They can review them and tell us if they see any problems. But make it clear. Humanity fought this war. Humanity won this war. And humanity decides how it ends." That statement would cause problems later. Right now, Lisa didn't care. She had lost 4,000 personnel in the battle. 4,000 people who would never go home. She wasn't in the mood to let politicians turn a military victory into a diplomatic mess. Commander Thrace of the Coalition fleet approached the Victory in a small shuttle. He had requested permission to meet with Admiral Kane in person. Lisa agreed, curious what the alien commander wanted to say. They met in a conference room. Thrace's 6 arms moved nervously as he settled into a chair designed for his species. Lisa sat across from him, her expression neutral. "Admiral Kane," Thrace began, "I have fought the Krell for 30 years. I've seen thousands of ships destroyed. I've watched entire fleets disappear, but I've never seen anything like what your forces did today." "We came prepared," Lisa said simply. "Prepared." Thrace repeated the word like it tasted strange. "You destroyed 3,000 ships in 90 seconds. You hunted down fleeing forces across multiple sectors. You shattered a moon. And you call this prepared? What would you call it? Thrace was quiet for a moment. Terrifying. Your weapons, your tactics, your coordination. It was like watching a predator hunt prey. There was no hesitation, no mercy, no doubt. You knew exactly what you would do before you arrived. We did, Lisa agreed. We spent 15 years preparing for this exact scenario. We studied every battle report, every Krell tactic, every weapon system. We built our fleet specifically to fight them, and when the time came, we executed the plan. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you share this technology with the Coalition? Lisa leaned back in her chair. Would you have used it? Antimatter warheads? AI coordination systems? Kinetic impactors? These weapons are banned by Coalition treaty. You would have called them inhumane. They killed millions, Thrace said quietly. Yes. In 5 hours, instead of 70 years. How many millions died in those 70 years, Commander? How many planets were consumed? How many species were enslaved? We ended that. We ended it fast, and we ended it completely. Thrace's arms curled in what might have been a gesture of acceptance. You're right. I know you're right. But it's difficult to process. For my entire adult life, the war has been there. It was the constant reality of existence. And now it's just over. Wars end, Lisa said. That's what people forget. Every war eventually ends. The only question is how much it costs before it does. We chose to pay the price up front all at once to make sure it ended today, instead of a decade from now. After Thrace left, Lisa stood alone in the conference room for a while. She thought about the 4,000 personnel who had died. She thought about the Krell civilians who had been caught in the bombardment of their moon. She thought about the price of victory. It was a price she would pay again if she had to. But she would never forget that it was paid in lives. Jake Morrison and his Marines were processing Krell prisoners on a captured base. Thousands of insect warriors had surrendered after the central command structure collapsed. They stood in organized groups, their weapons piled nearby, waiting to learn their fate. It's strange, Amy Cole said, watching the prisoners. They look smaller now. Less threatening. Jake understood what she meant. In combat, the Krell had been terrifying. 3 meters tall, armored, vicious. But now disarmed and defeated, they just looked like insects. Big insects, but still just animals following orders. Process them and send them to internment facilities, Jake ordered. Make sure they get food and medical care. The war's over. They're not enemies anymore. Just prisoners, Amy agreed. One of the Krell warriors approached, moving slowly with its hands visible. It was smaller than most, maybe a junior officer or specialist. It stopped a respectful distance away and made a clicking sound that the translation device picked up. I wish to speak with human commander. Jake stepped forward. I'm Colonel Morrison. What do you want? To understand, we were told humans were weak, primitive, easy prey, but you destroyed us. How? Jake considered the question. We're not primitive. We've been fighting wars for our entire history. We got very good at it. And when we learned about the Krell, we prepared. For 15 years. We know. But how did you advance so quickly? Because we had to. When you're facing an enemy that eats planets, you find motivation. We took your technology, the Coalition's technology, everything we could learn, and we improved it. We made it better. That's what humans do. We adapt. The Krell warrior was quiet for a moment. What happens to us now? You go home. Your military is disbanded. Your empire is over. But your species survives. You get to rebuild, but this time without conquering anyone. And if we refuse? If we try to rebuild our military? Jake's expression hardened. Then we come back. And next time, we won't stop at destroying your moon. Is that clear enough? The Krell warrior backed away, clicking its understanding. Captain Derek Shaw and the Philadelphia returned to Earth 3 days after the war ended. His crew was exhausted. They had flown 15 missions in those 5 hours, striking targets across 3 sectors without rest. Derek reported to the Admiralty in person. The old building in Washington, D.C. looked the same as always, solid stone and tradition. Inside, the mood was different. There was pride, but also awareness of what they had done. Fleet Admiral Peter Stone met with Derek in his office. Stone was old, gray-haired, with eyes that had seen too much war in his life. The Philadelphia's record is impressive, Stone said, reviewing the mission reports. 15 successful strikes. Every target destroyed. No casualties. We got lucky, Derek said. No, you got good. You and your crew executed perfectly. Stone closed the report. But I need to ask you something, Captain. The moon? Did you hesitate at all? Derek met his gaze. Yes, sir. For about 2 seconds. Then I remembered what the Krell did to the Centauri colonies, how they ate civilians alive, and I gave the order. Do you regret it? I regret that it was necessary. But given the same situation again, I'd make the same choice. That moonstrike ended the war. If we hadn't done it, how many more would have died? Stone nodded slowly. That's what I needed to hear. You understand the weight of the decision. You're not a monster who enjoyed it. You're a soldier who did what needed to be done. He stood and offered his hand. Well done, Captain. Take some leave. You've earned it. Commander Karen Price spent days compiling her analysis of the war. Her report would be required reading at military academies across the Coalition for decades. She tried to explain what made human warfare so effective. It wasn't just the technology, though, that was impressive. It wasn't just the tactics, though those were revolutionary. It was the mindset. Humans fought wars to end them, not to win territory or extract concessions or demonstrate power. They fought to completely eliminate the threat. That made them more aggressive, more willing to take risks, more brutal when necessary. The Coalition species fought wars like sports matches, with rules and limits and acceptable outcomes. Humans fought wars like their survival depended on winning, because in their history, it usually did. Karen finished her report with a warning. Any species considering conflict with humanity should understand this fundamental truth. Humans do not fight to win battles. They fight to ensure those wars never happen again. They will use any weapon, any tactic, any strategy necessary to achieve total victory. And they will not stop until their enemy cannot continue. President Helen Martinez addressed the United Nations General Assembly 1 week after the war ended. The chamber was packed with representatives from every nation on Earth. The mood was celebratory but also nervous. Humanity had just proven itself as a galactic military power. What came next? We did not seek this war, Helen began. But when our friends and neighbors faced annihilation, we answered the call. We committed our forces, our resources, and our people to ending a threat that had terrorized the galaxy for decades. She paused, looking around the chamber. The cost was significant. 4,000 of our people died in those 5 hours. 4,000 families who lost someone they loved. We honor their sacrifice. We remember their courage. And we commit ourselves to making sure they're... 3 weeks after the war ended, President Helen Martinez stood before the Galactic Council. The chamber was enormous, a sphere of crystal and metal floating in orbit above a neutral world. Representatives from 64 species filled the seats, their forms ranging from humanoid to truly alien. They were all looking at Helen with a mixture of respect and fear. President Martinez, the council speaker began. He was a Centauri named Vorlak, tall and thin with silver skin. On behalf of the Galactic Coalition, we thank you for your decisive action against the Krell Empire. Your contribution to the war effort was significant. Helen smiled slightly. Significant was one way to describe ending a 70-year war in 5 hours. We're glad we could help, she said. The Krell threatened not just the Coalition, but all free species, including humanity. We simply did what was necessary. Indeed. Vorlak's tone suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with how necessary it had been. However, your methods have raised concerns among council members. The weapons you used, the tactics you employed, they go beyond what the Coalition considers acceptable in warfare. Let me be clear about something, Helen said, her voice calm but firm. We didn't sign the Coalition weapons treaties. We're not bound by your rules of warfare. When we committed our forces, we did so using our own military doctrine, which includes antimatter weapons, kinetic bombardment, and artificial intelligence control systems, another council member said, all of which are banned under Coalition law. All of which won the war, Helen replied. For 70 years you fought by your rules and you lost. We fought by ours and won in 5 hours. I'm not going to apologize for that. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species agreed with Helen, others were horrified. The argument continued for several minutes until Vorlak called for order. President Martinez, the council must know your intentions. Your military has demonstrated capabilities far beyond anything we imagined. What will humanity do with this power? Helen looked around the chamber. She saw fear in some eyes, hope in others. They needed to understand what humanity was, what they stood for. We're going back to our territory, she said. We're not here to conquer or control. We fought this war because the Krell threatened our home and our neighbors. Now that the threat is gone, we have no interest in expanding our influence. But you'll keep your military, Vorlak said. Of course we will. We're not stupid. We just showed the galaxy what we're capable of. That makes us a target. Anyone looking to test themselves against the species that beat the Krell might decide to attack Earth. So yes, we'll keep our fleet. We'll keep our weapons. And we'll stay ready. That's what concerns us, another council member said. Your weapons could threaten any species in the galaxy. How do we know you won't use them against us? Helen's expression hardened. You don't, you have to trust us. Just like we have to trust that you won't turn against us someday. That's how peace works. Not through disarmament, but through mutual respect and understanding of consequences. She pulled up a holographic display showing human casualties. In 5 hours of combat, we lost 4,000 people. That's 4,000 families destroyed, 4,000 futures ended. We paid a price for this victory, and we paid it because we believed ending the war quickly was worth the cost. The display changed to show Krell casualties. The numbers were much larger. We also caused significant enemy casualties. We destroyed military forces, industrial facilities, and yes, we killed civilians in the moon bombardment. We accept responsibility for that. But ask yourselves this. How many died in the last 5 years of your war? How many in the last decade? How many more would have died if we hadn't ended it? The chamber was quiet. Everyone there knew the answer. Millions died every year in the war. The human intervention, brutal as it was, had probably saved more lives than it cost. We're not monsters, Helen continued. We're not conquerors. We're people who understand that sometimes peace requires the willingness to fight. You invited us into this war. We finished it. Now we're going home. If you need help again, call us. If you want to trade, we're interested. If you want to be friends, even better. But don't ask us to change who we are or how we fight. Because next time you face an enemy like the Krell, you might need us again. She sat down. The council debated for hours, but in the end, they accepted humanity's terms. What choice did they have? The species that ended the Krell Empire in 5 hours wasn't going to let the council dictate their military policy. Admiral Lisa Kane returned to Earth 3 months after the war. Her fleet was given a hero's welcome, parades in every major city, medals and commendations for everyone who served. But Lisa found the celebrations difficult. She kept thinking about the people who didn't come home. She visited families personally, as many as she could. In a suburb of Denver, she sat with the parents of Lieutenant Dan Wright, a pilot who died in the first wave of attacks. He always wanted to fly in space, his mother said, showing Lisa pictures of a young man in uniform. Ever since he was a kid watching the stars. He was an excellent pilot, Lisa said. His squadron commander told me he saved 3 other ships before his own was hit. He was brave and skilled. Will it matter? The father asked. Will anyone remember in 50 years? In 100? Lisa didn't have an easy answer for that. I don't know if people will remember his name. But they'll remember that humanity stood up when it mattered, that we fought for what was right. Your son was part of that. His sacrifice meant something. It was cold comfort, and Lisa knew it. But it was all she could offer. Jake Morrison and his Marines were honored in a ceremony at Camp Pendleton. The Commandant of the Marine Corps presented them with unit citations and individual medals. Jake accepted his with mixed feelings. We did our job, he told Amy Cole later after the ceremony ended. We boarded ships, got intelligence, and survived. That's all? That's enough, Amy replied. We were good at our jobs. That matters, does it? We helped end a war, but we also helped kill millions. Is being good at killing something to be proud of? Amy was quiet for a moment. I think it depends on why you're doing it. We killed to stop worse killing. That's not nothing. Jake wanted to believe that. Most days he did. But some nights he dreamed about the Krell warriors they had fought, the dying ships they had boarded, the cost of victory. Those nights were harder. Captain Derek Shaw never talked about the moon. In official reports, his mission was listed simply as strategic bombardment of enemy infrastructure. The details were classified. Very few people knew he was personally responsible for the attack that killed 4 million Krell civilians. He received a promotion to admiral and a new command. On the surface, life went on. But late at night, alone in his quarters, Derek sometimes pulled up images of that moon before it was destroyed, beautiful in its way, covered in cities and industrial zones, home to millions of living beings. Then he would pull up images of the Centauri colonies the Krell had consumed, the bodies stacked like garbage. The survivors traumatized beyond healing, the children who would never grow up. It didn't make what he did right, but it made it necessary. Derek learned to live with that distinction. Commander Karen Price published her analysis of the 5-Hour War. It became the most read military document in coalition history. Every officer candidate studied it. Every tactician analyzed it. Every species tried to understand what it meant. Her conclusion was simple but profound. Humanity approaches warfare from a fundamentally different perspective than other galactic species. They do not see war as an extension of politics to be managed and controlled. They see war as a disease, to be cured as quickly and completely as possible, even if the cure is painful. This makes them dangerous allies and terrifying enemies. They will sacrifice much to win, but once they commit to a cause, they are absolutely relentless. Any species considering conflict with humanity must understand that humans fight to end wars, not to win battles. There is no stalemate with humanity, no honorable draw. There is only complete victory or complete defeat. The document ended with a warning that would echo through the centuries. The 5-Hour War demonstrated that humanity possesses both the capability and the will to conduct total warfare on a galactic scale. They showed us 1% of their military strength and ended the longest war in modern history. What they could do if truly threatened is beyond calculation. Perhaps it is better that we never find out. General Paul Hendricks retired from active service 2 years after the war. He was 63, tired, and ready to rest. On his last day, he visited the memorial on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. A black wall listed every human who died in the 5-Hour War. 4,217 names. Paul had read them all many times. He ran his hand along the cool stone, feeling the engraved letters. Was it worth it? Someone asked behind him. Paul turned to see a young woman in civilian clothes. She had the same eyes as Lieutenant Dan Wright. His sister, maybe, or cousin. I don't know, Paul said honestly. I can tell you that if we hadn't fought, millions more would have died. I can tell you that the Krell Empire would have kept consuming planets and enslaving species. I can tell you that sometimes the only way to stop evil is with force. But was it worth my brother's life?